Welcome everyone to a very special GIS report. I am Crystal Kanyuk Abel with the Department of Disaster Management, and I'm here today with two guests to reflect on our memories of Hurricane Irma. We're on the 5-year anniversary now. It's a pretty big milestone. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about emergency first response with our acting assistant commissioner, Mr. St. Clair Amory. And we have also our Chief Fire Officer, Mrs. Eblon McLean. So thank you so much for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having us.
All right. So let's get right into it. When we reflect back, when did you know that Hurricane Irma was going to be a different kind of impact than we had seen in recent memory?
I can recall being in my office and my window being pulled open. Hurricanes before that had passed where I would have been at the station, that never happened. But when I went to the control room, 4 officers was inside there, and basically they were overwhelmed with calls. Persons were just calling, asking for assistance simply because their roofs, were going. They were hiding out in their bathroom or laundry. And I could even remember a colleague of mine in Anguilla calling and saying, listen, brace yourself for this because there has been severe devastation across across Anguilla, and I saying all kind of trees, big trees that have been there for long period of time had been destroyed. So brace yourself. So for me, that would have been about the time when I knew it was going to be different.
Well, for me, as you know, I'm a former deputy director at the Department of Disaster Management. And I knew it was going to be different because, for one, the language that Charlene, the then director, used was one of greater urgency that she had ever used before. The only thing she did not do was to go down on her knees and beg and plead for persons to get ready. I called the Department of Disaster Management and I spoke to the technicians there first, and I asked them to be completely frank with me. And when they told me what we were expecting, I was extremely concerned. There were many persons who had not lived or not been old enough to remember Hugo. There were many others who did not quite remember Marilyn. And I believe that they were a little comfortable. But when I was given the frank outline of what was going to be impacting us, I was extremely concerned, and I was hoping that persons would prepare as much as possible because the Category 5 is nothing that we had ever seen before. That's when I knew.
Right. And then as it comes to pass, not only is it Category 5, it ended up being such a record-breaking storm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So how did you balance the competing challenges that you needed to based on the magnitude of the response, right? So we had so much different calls on our time, all of us did. How were you able to keep those different things balanced?
I mean, for us, after the impact itself, we actually pulled all the departments together. There was no department actually just doing what it normally did during that time. So we had to pull everybody together, and the number of officers would have been still out because they were impacted by the storm itself. So therefore, was actually pulling everybody together, looking at all the different damages to infrastructure around the territory, no power and so forth, and actually making sure that there was security being posted in several areas. And then I think within a week, the UK military came on board, and which gave us the additional security to move around about the territory. And I think it was early as well that you had the new Curfew Act, which also helped us in order to make sure that persons stayed off the streets at nights. Yeah.
Well, for us, pre-positioning was everything. Our Deputy Chief Fire Officer, Mr. William Penn, he was in charge of operations, and what he recommended was that we had teams in place before the impact. So we had a team in West End, a team in Road Town, and we also had a team operating out of the hospital because we expected that simply because there were more structures in Road Town, there would be more damage. So we had 2 teams operating out of Road Town, one operating out of the eastern side, one out of the western side. And of course, Virgin Gorda had their teams at the ready. So as soon as you were given the all clear, then is when we decided to move.
And did it play out as you all had expected in terms of that? I mean, we spoke about taking the calls, during the event and having everybody kind of pre-placed. I'm just curious as to how it was in like the very beginning of the response, to keep the officers going, to keep your teams going.
Well, for us, one of the major hurdles was that there was no communication. So we simply did not know. But we had to operate in the sphere that we were in. So we were able to respond and then to continue to ask, have we heard from this team? Have we heard from that team? And to be quite frank, we expected more casualties, but by the grace of God, fortunately, that did not happen.
That was a similar situation for ourselves. It's like all the stations were basically cut off. You were hearing of Jos van Dyke and wondering, are they there still? So it was looking out and just seeing the devastation and asking yourself, is this Beirut? Because you would have seen things on television, but you hadn't seen them in real life. And asking yourself, I wonder.
Yes.
Yeah, you have to get at least 100 plus persons dead or something based on the devastation itself.
Yes, I do recall some of that early media coverage, and having family abroad, just wondering, like, well, who could have survived all that? The visual of that devastation, it was very serious. But as we kind of progress through, the early response phase and getting towards recovery, at what point did you feel like things were getting close to normal, something approaching normal?
I would say for us internally, it would have been where we would have gotten the assistance already from the UK military, and then we had our counterparts from the overseas territories who then came in and assisted us to try and provide some law and order throughout the territory, because you remember we had some looting, we had the prison being damaged, so, and security, because persons within the community needed to have some kind of assurance. You have no electricity whatsoever, so that to me that was a fear among the community. And then externally was getting back power within the Road Town area, as well as other outskirts, and getting some assistance for the prison, and even looking at the supermarkets, where you then start seeing the long lines diminishing for persons trying to get food. So to me, those were things that you can see, well, and there was some sort of normalcy coming back.
Well, for me, to begin, there are things about the storm that people are going to tend to forget. And when they relate some of those sights and sounds, even they themselves might find it incredulous. But when we came out after the all clear, there was not a single leaf on a single tree anywhere in the territory. And every single building, everyone suffered some kind of damage. The roads were impassable. You couldn't travel for more than 10 feet without having to step over, step under, or move something aside. That was a completely different world. And for me, when things started to get back to normal, as far as I'm concerned, is when persons who are non-emergency personnel were able to go back to work, were able to actually start to make the trek back to work. For me, that represented some sort of normalcy. Another aspect that made things appear to be normal, and this is something that I regretted even knowing, was that during the storm, you had many of the landlords and the building owners running and fleeing for shelter among their tenants. And when the landlords then, after a while, started making demands on their tenants, in spite of the fact that many of their buildings were still gutted, then is when, unfortunately, I knew that things were getting back to normal. Sorry to be so blunt, but that is what I saw.
So as soon as we kind of came out of that crisis period,
Yes.
you had certain folks who they forgot about their
Yes.
their charitable spirit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that is an unfortunate downside, right? Yeah. What's something that was accomplished during the recovery that you feel particularly proud of?
For us, I would say we had the overseas territory officers and UK officers coming. to see that kind of camaraderie in a person's coming in, being able to work with them, and we welcome them, and at the same time, they in turn actually show their appreciation for what we had gone through, and then many of them after they would have done their tour of duty also volunteered in the communities in order to give back as well. So that to me that is something I'm proud of, to see that despite what was happening and they came to do their work, they also volunteered and gave back to a lot of people within the community.
So we know that they had a positive enough experience that they wanted to continue to contribute to the recovery process.
Definitely, yeah.
On our side, I still remain so proud of our officers because every fire station was damaged. The fire service headquarters was almost practically destroyed. We had one working appliance. The helmets, the boots, the tunics, the leggings, they were all blown away. So our guys are responding in t-shirts and jeans, and if they could find something here and there to wrap themselves in, they were. But they were going. They were moving, they were responding, they were helping persons. And that, even if I wasn't the chief, I would find that extremely admirable. Another thing that I'm thankful of, though, is all these tabletop exercises and these national simulation exercises and these models and everything we look at. They actually work. Once you stick to the plan, whether you're applying ICS or whatever you're applying, Amory and I can both attest that as long as everyone plays the role that they're assigned to, they can work. Of course, it takes some sort of steely resolve because in the face of that devastation and possible deaths, you tend to be a little emotional. But that's what we're trained for. So that was something that I was also especially proud of. And lastly, I was proud of the people of the Virgin Islands. There were some persons who, unfortunately, fell into depression because they had so much that they had worked so many years for. And to see leave in just literally overnight, many of them couldn't accept that reality. And as you know, we had more funerals between 2017 and 2019 than we had in the previous, 10 years. But that was actually the minority because the majority of Virgin Islanders did not give up. They looked at the devastation in the face and they continued to move forward and rebuild and go back to work. That I'm also especially proud of.
Well, I'm actually very proud of those things as well.
Yes.
You know, having lived through it and having witnessed some of those same really self-sacrificing and community-minded behaviors. So
Yes.
I'm right there with you. Yeah. So one last question. This is more towards reminding our viewers that these kinds of threats never really go away. If you could go back to your pre-Irma self, if you could give yourself a little bit of advice, what would you share?
For me, it's all about preparation and basically not taking anything for granted. Because you can plan and plan and plan and plan, but I must say, in terms of to me, looking at the category 1, whether it is 1 or 5, is a matter of actually making sure that those plans are in place and everybody knows what they're supposed to do. But at the same time, I think for us, communication is important, and making sure that in terms of our transportation, all of those things are taken into consideration. So overall, I just said that take nothing for granted, expect the worst, and be prepared to deal with it because we know we would say there are lessons learned from what happened.
Yes.
So it's a matter of actually making sure that whatever preparatory work needs to be done prior to, we do it and take nothing for granted.
Well, if I could go back to my pre-Irma self, during the storm, I had to leave my house, grab my wife and leave my house, or we would have been killed. And then I had to save my neighbors as well, another family of 6, and my neighbors on the other side, which was a family of 5. So I would have moved everyone, including myself, prior to the storm. The DDM continues to put out information regarding the location of the shelters. And even in my capacity, I felt kind of secure. Going back, I would not have done that. I would have ensured that my neighbors, myself, and my wife moved early. Secondly, I would have done everything within my power to reciprocate the warnings that the then director of disaster management was trying to get out there to the public. I would have tried to speak in the same language he had. I would have tried to impact as many people as possible. I didn't do that because I kind of left it up to persons on their own to heed the warnings. But sometimes you need a little push, a little help and guidance. So that's what I would have done. And like Superintendent Armory said, when it comes to hurricanes, you have to expect the worst. These storms are so powerful. If you were to drop a nuclear bomb inside of them and have it explode, it would not affect them in the least. It would continue rolling towards the Caribbean. That is how powerful these forces of nature are. So if they're that powerful, what are they going to do to your house? What are they going to do to you? So never take anything for granted and always, always prepare. I mean, it happens every year, every single year we have a hurricane season. So by now we should know we need to prepare.
Mhm, mhm. Well, I would definitely echo that advice for everyone who's viewing at home. You know, take the time to prepare now, and just know that these things can happen.
Yes.
It's not something that we can really predict, but it is something that we can work together and prepare for. So thank you both so much for your efforts throughout the recovery process, and also for joining us here today. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you
us
for having
again.
us.
Yeah, and to the viewers, thanks so much for watching. We have a few more of these coming up in the series, so reflect with us and also prepare with us for the Department of Disaster Management and the Department of Information and Public Relations. I am Crystal Kenya Cable. Thanks again.